Hey everybody, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. My name is Chris Peterson of HuskerBigRed.com, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette of thegreatcornholio.org. And we're here on a Saturday morning. We don't have a game, but we do have some Nebraska football news to talk about. So we're going to get into Mickey Joseph. But first, Danny, how you doing this morning?
Good. We were just talking about football off air even before we started the show, mentioning names like Drew Henson and Wes Welker. So that's how excited we are to talk some football on this Saturday.
Talking some old school New England Patriots and get off on a bit of a tangent. But from a Nebraska perspective, no game on Saturday, which some people might say is a good thing. I don't know if I've ever not wanted to have a Nebraska game on Saturday, but it was good to get a little bit of a break after last week's
Yeah.
loss. But, you know, we did have some news drop Friday night with the Mickey Joseph, kind of his updated contract now that he's the interim, head coach for the rest of this season. And a couple of the interesting things in there. But just to hop right in, Danny, what were your kind of initial reactions to it?
To me, and I've had several people disagree with me, which is fine. Like, that is totally cool. I'm just saying the way I read it was that Mickey Joseph would probably stay with Nebraska. I mean, I'm just pulling up the contract terms right now, and uh, let me see here. It says there is certain incentives. So if the football program wins the Big West Division title, uh, he gets 100,000, 200,000 if they um, do not win the Big Ten Conference Championship game, and then if they win it, 300,000. So there's different incentive based types of things, and obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously because you never know, but he may not hit any of these. But I just thought it was interesting that they kind of restructured, maybe as kind of a reaffirmation for him that this isn't a throwaway season, so to speak, and that he does have something to work for. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, for sure. I know there was also, I'm pretty sure I saw $150,000 bonus for a non-playoff bowl game. So I mean, I may have read that wrong, but that means if this team gets to a bowl game, that's a nice payday for Mickey, and I
Mm,
think that would be a big thing for Nebraska football. I do think yeah, people are right in the sense that a new coach doesn't necessarily he could fire Mickey obviously if he wanted to. That would give Mickey some sort of buyout or whatever. But I think it does kind of put it on paper, and he's telling that to recruits. I mean, Malachi Coleman talked about that. When Mickey was down there visiting him recently, that was one of the more recent things he said to Steve Wiltfong of 24/7 Sports. That Mickey, was saying to him, "Hey, I'm going to be here next year no matter what." And I think that this just I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I think it kind of goes along with that, and it's at least something he can tell recruits on the trail. Hey, if I'm not hired, I'm going back to my next position. That's what my contract says. So it just gives him more things I think to sell recruiting wise, and sure, it's going to give him a little more incentive. Not that he needed more, because I think he
right.
knows
Yeah.
he knows if this goes well, it's going to help out his career, and I do think that there's a lot of supporters still out there. I still see a lot of people in my mentions and on Facebook that, still want Mickey Joseph to be the next head coach. So we'll see what happens.
And we saw a quote from 2025 recruit Tyson Terry yesterday, and he said, "I feel like Mickey Joseph. He likes Mickey Joseph as the head coach, and he feels like it could be a factor in his decision for the future." Now, I've heard Tyson Terry's name for a couple of years now as one of the in-state recruits that we have to land. So, I mean, maybe Mickey as head coach could really kind of sway the recruiting ranks. And these 2024 and 2025 in-state classes are extremely strong. So to hear somebody like Tyson Terry say that, that certainly carries a little bit of weight.
Yeah, and I think this is one thing I was thinking about too, is whether or not Mickey succeeds in this role as the head coach. And because I think, he's got to get to, I think 6-6 would be like the minimum he would have to hit to kind of be considered for the job. I mean, it just depends how it all plays out, but I think he would have he would at least deserve, some real consideration if that happened. And because then this program would have, I mean, if they won 5 out of the next 8 games, it would have some real momentum, like momentum that they literally never had in the Scott that would be a more successful run than they ever had under Scott Frost. I mean, he won 5-12. I mean, 5-7. He won 5 games and out of 12. That was the best he ever did. So I think he does have an opportunity. He does have a lot of support. And if you look at the 2023 class right now, man, if Mickey goes, like if that coach fires Mickey, that class is going to fall apart. So in a roundabout way, what I meant to say at the beginning of this is that I think whoever is hired as the next head coach, I think they would have to kind of be an idiot not to keep Mickey Joseph on staff. I mean, if you really think about it, it's kind of a no-brainer to me.
I mean, yeah, you're talking about and one of the people in my mentions yesterday said that the coaching circle is very small, and you can bet obviously that Mickey Joseph is a big name in the coaching circle, so to speak. So it's not like he's just some unheralded Nebraska assistant. Obviously, he's had a track record wherever he's gone. So I think whoever is the head coach, should Mickey not be, definitely should at least consider Mickey for the head job, because there's a lot more to what Mickey brings to the table than just wins and losses. He has been able to connect with the types of players that could help turn this program around for the future.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. I mean, one of Scott Frost's biggest failures was not putting together a quality staff. I mean, if you look at every quality coach has a quality staff. You look at Nick Saban and all the guys that have coached under him and gone on to be successful. Like, yes, Nick Saban is a huge part of that, and he's teaching them and everything else. But those guys, Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, they can coach football. So I mean, it really helps to have those guys. And if Mickey Joseph's fired from Nebraska, some SEC team will scoop him up like that, because the dude can recruit Louisiana. He can develop talent, and whether or not he's going to be a head coach, like, he's going to help whatever program he's at win games. So I think that Nebraska should keep him right here. And, that's why he'd be perfect with my number one candidate right now, which is Dave Aranda. He's number one on my list. I don't know if it's reasonable at all, but I think he'd be perfect just with his connections to Mickey. I love that he's coached in the Big Ten. But like I said, Mickey, I think, still does have a chance if they can start, getting some momentum, because the thing about it is everything looks really bad, and it looked bad after that Oklahoma game. But the thing about football, it's this week-to-week thing, and if you start winning and you win a few games, man, like a month from now, people will totally forget all about this.
And I don't even think that Mickey has to get to a bowl game. I just think, it's up to the discretion, obviously, of Trev Alberts. But if Trev deems that there's going to be progress and, not better days, because I don't want to sound corny, but if he believes that, the direction of this program is trending correctly in the future, then I think he keeps Mickey, because, Mickey is dealing, and Bill Bush is dealing, and all these, and the rest of this coaching staff is dealing with things that are really kind of out of their control right now. So I think as long as they build a solid foundation from here on out, and winning definitely helps. I think I could see a case where Mickey stays, and that will allow him to really begin to build the program. And not only that, but it would allow them to keep Mickey on the staff for the early signing day and the transfer portal entries, which begin on December 6th.
Yeah, and that would be huge, if he was able to stay on as head coach. But even as the assistant coach, and looking back at USC, I think USC is like, if any Nebraska fan could have it their ideal way, be like USC, right? 4-8 to now they're ranked number 7. Well, their interim head coach, Dante Williams, is another elite recruiter. And so he actually was able to hold on to the commitment of Damani Jackson. I don't know if people know him, but he was the number one cornerback, if Nebraska fans don't know, in the 2022 class. And he's like unbelievable. He did have an injury, but he's going to be like you're going to know this guy's name. And USC kept him without a head coach. So, I mean, and there was everybody wanted him. Alabama, a lot of big time programs. So but he was really connected with Dante Williams. And if Dante Williams would have left, he would have lost his commitment. So, I mean, that was a no-brainer for Lincoln Riley. And I think that shows that. I'm not saying that, in regards to Malachi Coleman or anything like that, but, every recruit is different and they all have their own decisions. And it really does matter those assistant coaches. And so I think that's why it was an important move to kind of get that out there and to have that contract for Mickey, and to at least have it on paper that, if he's not hired as the head coach, he's still going to be here. Now that next coach maybe could do that, could maybe fire him or whatever, but I really, really don't see it happening. I think either as the head coach or back as the receivers coach, I think there's like a 90-some% chance Mickey's back next year.
And do you think that Nebraska gives Mickey a little bit of extra money if he stays heading into the offseason, just to kind of reinsure the fact that he stays, aside from this contract? Because to me, this contract reads that, it's mostly season based incentives. Do you think they give him like a head coaching type of boost money wise, and just in order to keep him, if possible?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't think that they're really gonna have to that much. I mean, he's already making 600,000. I mean, he could get boosted up a little bit, and that probably depends, I guess, on the head coach. I think he'd probably be the associate head coaching, but that's hard. It's like, if Matt Campbell's hired, just throwing this out there as an example, would he? I think he's got a lot of people on his staff he would want to bring over with him. Now, maybe one of those coordinators would try to take the job at Iowa State if he was hired. But it's like, does that guy want Mickey Joseph to be his associate head coach? So that's where I think it kind of can get a little tricky. But you only have so many kind of titles that you can play around with, right? You need your coordinators, your associate head coach, or your assistant. I can't remember if it's associate and assistant head coach. Maybe there's multiple ones, but
I think it's associate, and wide receivers and passing game coordinator, I want to say.
yeah, so I mean, they might give him and I don't know, maybe they would, if he got to be a coordinator. I don't know if he's ever called plays, but I think they could maybe get him a little something. But I really think depending on who you hire and what position, you're probably going to be trying to hire some big time coordinators too.
Yeah, and one of my friends, who coached in the NFL, and he said this to me, and although it really doesn't apply to college football, I kind of like, what he had to say here. He said, you know, there's 32 jobs for my position, which at the time I believe was quarterbacks coach. You better perform or else your ass is out. And I feel like even though there's more college football programs, obviously, there's still a small circle that, you know, of football coaches and good selections that you can choose from. And I feel like Mickey, in that respect, is kind of a no brainer just because of the amount of qualified people. Yes, there's a lot of programs, but qualified people is a whole nother story, as we unfortunately have come to realize.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that Brian Applewhite stays.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see Becton, and I'm not. I think the jury's still out for me on Bill Bush. I mean, I've just heard a lot of good things. Sipple's written a couple of articles talking about Bill Bush, and he seems like he could do. I'm not saying that you want him as your defensive coordinator, but he seems like somebody I wouldn't mind him coaching my safeties. I mean, that's what he did for the national championship team. So I do think there are some components on this staff, and that's where Dave Aranda again could fit in because he's coached with Bill Bush, and that would just be such a natural fit. But I don't know, and people in our last video kind of were saying that Dave wouldn't leave, because of Baylor. I don't think it's because of Baylor. I think if you compare Nebraska and Baylor, Nebraska's a better job. I don't care what success Baylor's had right now, because I know they're in Texas, but even so, like every year during the Frost era, Nebraska had a higher ranked recruiting class. Like Nebraska can recruit. Like every single, I think going back to like 2015 or 16, outside of 2022, Nebraska's had a top 25 class. They've got state of the art facilities. Like Nebraska's still Nebraska. I just think if Dave Aranda is going to leave Baylor, maybe he's waiting to go somewhere better than Nebraska. But in my sense, Baylor's not a better job than Nebraska. I don't know if you agree or not, but
I mean, Baylor, I think for this particular component in terms of program stability is better, but in terms of facilities, NIL, and recruiting, I think Nebraska's better. But I would really love Dave Aranda, and I know we kind of talked about this on Thursday, but I'm going to be interested to see, you know, which coaches from this staff stay, if any, which ones go. And to me, the jury is still out on Sean Beckton, not because I think he's a bad coach, but because his entire position basically and his recruits have been injured majorly in some fashion. I mean, you look this year at a guy like Travis Vokolek, and then you look, at what I called the big three: Carney, AJ Rollins, and Thomas Fedoni. They have had injury troubles too. So I don't think Beckton is bad. I just want to see his group just get healthy and be able to contribute.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, and he's still. I think all these guys are still coaching for their jobs.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, he's one. Just yeah, I would love because he's gotten some big guys like Thomas Fedoni. But we'll see what happens with all that. But yeah, it's interesting too. And I think too about like the playoff and how the expanded playoff factors into things because like if the playoff wasn't expanding, then maybe a head coach wouldn't want to stay in the Big 12 as much. But if it's going to 12 and you're taking the top 6 conference champions, then the Big 12 is perfectly fine. Especially with Cincinnati and Houston coming in, like you're going to have a guaranteed berth almost every year. So like Dave Aranda and Baylor sitting in that league, like I know you're not gonna make as much money as the Big 10, and you're probably only going to get like one bid out of the Big 12. But I mean, Baylor could be running that league, you know what I mean, with Texas and Oklahoma gone. But at the same time, I still feel like Nebraska, in terms of the same way, making the playoff. I mean, if you're a team in the Big 10, all you really have to do is make it to the championship game, like with one loss, and you're basically in the playoff.
Well, that's the thing too. This 12-team playoff could allow for somebody like Aranda to kind of renegotiate his contract a little bit and say, "Hey, I've made the playoff 4 out of the last 5 years. I would like more money." I mean, it's hard to not give raises to good performance. Again, we wouldn't know what that's been like lately, but it does happen, I assure you. And no, but that could be a really big negotiating point for him. At which point Baylor could give him more money, and at which point his stock is going to rise and other programs will want him. So maybe that will force Baylor to pay him well. I mean, there is a lot of opportunities with this 12-team playoff, and it's not just based off of wins and losses on the field. It's also a chance for coaches to really kind of cement their status and, give them an opportunity to, kind of, drive up their value.
So are you going to, as interesting as it is, Baylor and Dave Aranda will be playing Matt Campbell and Iowa State today. So are you going to be watching that in the Nebraska Head Coaching Bowl, let's call it?
Yeah, I'll watch that. I mean, it's kind of nice just to watch games without being so stressed out that I just want to shut off the TV. So I'll probably watch a lot today. And, there are some good games on today. So I am going to be watching that. It's kind of weird without Nebraska football, but I'm not envying the the relaxed watching portion of it, I'll say.
Yeah, when Nebraska loses, yeah, it ruins my team loses, just makes me not want to even watch like
You get so
football the
stressed
rest of
out.
the day. Yeah, it sucks. And it's just like then when I watch other games, like if I'll go to watch the game at night, I can get into it a little bit, but then I'm just like I sit there and I'm watching, I'm like, why can't Nebraska do that? Or why can't they, it's just like I
It
just am
makes everybody
depressed all
so
the time.
jaded. Yeah, it makes everybody so jaded. And then, of course, the Husker Twitter is always active, so you kind of got to deal with that still. Just like, oh, come on, why couldn't we just win? Especially after the Iowa games and stuff like that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have, that's why next week, like with Indiana, it was nice to have a bye week, and I think this team really needed it. Especially, they had that whole trip to Ireland. Like this team really has gone through a lot, travel, coaches being fired, new coaches, so they need some time to rest up and reset. But I think it would be nice to talk about just some football, and a win would help with that because after every game is after Georgia Southern, it was Frost being fired, and then it's this last week. It's just been controversy about Mickey and the all the other head coaching candidates. So it'd be nice to just. I feel like if Nebraska loses, there's nothing else to talk about but who's going to be the next head coach. Whereas if you win, then I feel like you can have some other conversations that people are going to want to carry on. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, and this to me is just a chance for the program to reset. I don't really count the Oklahoma game. That was a tough ask. And, now it's a chance to really see what the week off. I mean, you talk about programs that needed a bye week. This program needed a bye week, and so I'm going to be interested to see what they do against Indiana. And I think we're going to see a rejuvenated bunch. I think we're going to see, and we'll get into this more later in the week, but I expect a positive result from them after reviewing film, getting with the new coaches for a week, and then trying to put it all together.
Yep, it'll be interesting. These next 4 games are going to be huge, and one thing like we've talked about, they need to get some wins because like nobody wants to come to a 1-11 program. Like whoever's fired or the head coach, you need to get some wins for recruiting, and we've actually had a lot of recruiting news this week, and with Nebraska not playing a game, it's been a great chance for Mickey and the staff to hit the trail, hit the road, and I think almost every single coach has been doing that over the next couple of weeks, according to Husker Online. They're going to be visiting every single recruit, that they've got committed. So that I think is a big deal in trying to hold, this class together. So what have been some of your, impressions on kind of the recruiting strategy of Mickey, even though he's only in his second week as interim head coach?
Well, right now he's in Louisiana, I believe. So I really like I said on Thursday, he said that he would, leave the program in good shape and that he wouldn't give up on the program, which I think speaks a lot to his character and the fact that he wants the best for this program moving forward. And then, I think, recruiting the Louisiana, establishing that stronghold still is, a good thing. And I'm wondering what he's telling recruits, because it's a big ask kind of to ask recruits from Louisiana to come to Nebraska. So I would be interested to see what his recruiting pitch is there. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, I think he's telling kids that he's gonna be there for one thing, whether he's the head coach or not. And then I think it's about finding guys that are gonna be, attracted by Nebraska. This latest running back offer, Arnold Barnes the third, is a kid out of New Orleans, and he was a Tulane commit. He's ranked in the 13, I think like 1333 or something, in the 1300s, but he had like 5 or 6 touchdowns last week. Some other power programs are starting to sniff around, and so Mickey and Brian Applewhite have offered, and it sounds like they're going to have a chance to get him on campus for an official visit, which is a big deal, because it's like, whether Nebraska is down or whatever, like Nebraska is not Tulane. And so I think what Nebraska needs to do for this class right now is find more kids like that, the senior evaluations, the guys that you're kind of waiting to see how their film develops and how they develop their final season. I think they've got to find some diamond in the rough types, and because right now it's going to be hard to go up against the big time programs and win recruiting battles, but what you can do is hold your commitments, especially in the state of Nebraska. I think that's a really big thing. Make sure, because those guys are going to have some loyalty, so hold on to those, and then find these guys that you can flip. And if you've got a relationship, with like this Ricardo Allen kid, Louisiana, you feel like he can play at a bigger level than where he's committed, then go make the offer. And that's what you got to do right now.
And you talk about some of the bigger recruits. I was reading some stuff from 2024 tight end Carter Nelson. He's obviously a big recruit in the States from Ainsworth, Nebraska, 4-star recruit. And he said his visit was a good experience, and he got to talk to the coaches about how excited they are and the changes that they are ready to move forward with during the season. And so you hear that a lot from recruits, and you hear the, vote of confidence from a guy like Tyson Terry. What they do over these next 6 games could have huge ramifications.
Yeah, and speaking of 2024, I thought one thing that I wrote about this week that's kind of been reported that was a really smart move by Mickey was reaching out to Daniel Kalen, the 2024 quarterback in Nebraska. He's the number 4.
He's very good.
Yeah, he's the number 4th ranked player in the state. He's ranked in the top 500 overall of the 24/7 composite rankings, and like Nebraska had gone almost a year without talking to the kid. Like, what in the hell? I just don't understand. Like, Scott Frost really was not, like, he had this thing on autopilot. And so this kid, he had an offer from Nebraska. There wasn't a lot of communication. He took visits over the sun. He took a visit to Michigan State, and I'm just blanking on the other one, but I think Kansas. Yep, it was Kansas. So he
Yeah.
took, two unofficial visits, and Nebraska's just hanging out. So Mickey, reached out to him. I think he might have went and watched one of his games, but at least made contact with him and let him know that he's a priority. And it's like, the guy is the number 4 player in the state, and he's ranked almost 200 spots higher than our last 2 quarterback commitments. So why have you not talked to him in almost a year? It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, you're right. It absolutely does make no sense whatsoever. And like, so this is an example of where like, you know, there's been, the 6-6 barometer set for Mickey, but if he can get these players to come in and commit despite, what has happened this season, then I think this would be a notch in the belt as to keep him on the staff in some capacity. Mickey's also been after quarterback Haas, and I'm not sure how to say his last name, Hejny. I just don't want to butcher it. But
Yeah.
he's from Texas, class of 2024. He has offers from North Texas, TCU, Texas A&M. He's a 5'11" quarterback, but so he's even making forays into Texas, and I bet that Brian Applewhite has some sort of involvement in this as well, and so to me, if I'm Trev, I take all these names and recruits into consideration um, when deciding whether to keep Mickey on a potential staff or if he's going to be an assistant coach. Because right now he's still doing a lot of work, and I'm curious to see, like Carter Nelson said, it all depends on what plays out this season. Well, if they win, you know, will that affect Carter Nelson's decision? If they don't, will, that be a chance for some of these recruits to say, okay, but we know that Mickey's going to be here. This is a step forward in the right direction. And you mentioned Daniel Kalen. I didn't realize that Frost never offered him. I thought they did.
Well, they offered him, and then they didn't communicate with him. They just communication dropped off to the point where he basically said he didn't know if he had a real offer.
Well, that
So
was the same story that Ashley Williams told too. He said that communication was a big issue. So, you know, I'm wondering that, if Frost just didn't care about communicating with recruits, because especially now that we've lost Cameron Lenhart, I mean, communicating with Ashley Williams, not that he would have stayed, but the lack of communication with Kalen and Williams, it seems to be a theme a little bit.
yeah, I remember that at the time. And I said at the time, if you have the Auburn head coach, that's hitting you up all the time and communicating with you every day, you're gonna that's gonna get your attention. And if the Nebraska head coach, doesn't, what that sounded like is that Mickey Joseph recruited him, and that Mickey Joseph wanted him, and that Scott Frost, couldn't be bothered to recruit him, and that.
That's what it sounded like to me as well.
So I mean, that's. I think you see that quite a bit. I mean, you look at this last class, 2023 in the state of Nebraska. I mean, you had Zane Flores, another top
That's the name I was
500
thinking
kid.
of. Zane
Yeah,
Flores. There we go.
ranked number 2 in the state, and ended up going to Oklahoma State. Is committed there. I know Nebraska's got William Watson, the kid out of Massachusetts, who I like, but it's like you've got the number 2 player in the state, the number 24 player according to the 24/7 composite, and you're not even going to try to recruit him. You're not even going to put any. So it's just weird the way that Scott didn't recruit, basically.
At least with Mickey, he's a hard recruiter, and you're eliminating the quote unquote middleman in Frost so that Mickey can just get right to the chase.
Yeah, it's interesting. They offered a couple of top 100 linemen out in California this week. Not that I think in the 2024 class, not I think that they're going to get those guys per se, because like Donovan Raiola is in an interesting spot. I don't know. He's really got to get some improvement, in these last 8 games, or it's going to be hard for him to hold on to his job. I mean, this is the thing that Nebraska really needs as much as anything is, offensive and defensive line development. And I think they need to go find like a proven offensive line coach who's like done it for like 30 years, somebody maybe not quite that long. I mean, you need someone who can recruit, but you know what I mean? Somebody
Yeah,
that's like done it before. And they need the
but
same thing on defense too. Dawson's got to go.
for the offensive line, do you go with your third offensive line coach in 3 years though? I mean, do I think Rayola is the be all end all? No, I honestly don't at all. I thought he was an interesting hire at the time, but I mean, there's just no stability on the line, and I just don't know if hiring a new coach would be better at this point, just for the players' sake of, trying to learn another set of skills and techniques. Not that an offensive lineman is incredibly difficult to learn, but you know what I mean?
No, I do. Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't want to fire Rail. I think that's
Yeah,
why. But like, if this team doesn't, if the play just looks horrible in the next 8 games, then maybe
right.
it's on. I think it depends on who you hire too, because if I don't know who all these guys have on their staff as O-line coaches, but maybe, if it is Dave Aranda, he's like, dude, I've got this O-line coach who, he's the best. So, I mean, I think it depends on who the other candidates are, unfortunately, but it would be ideal if Rayola could just figure it out, and then you wouldn't have to move on. But he also was really left a mess in terms of, you can't make chicken
Yep.
salad out of chicken shit. That's the
Yep.
coaching. If you've ever coached any sport, you've probably heard that analogy and you understand it, because but it's like, why are you recruiting guys that are 6'9" to play tackle? I mean, it's just, I know that they're not the only ones, but it's like, I feel like they've got to make some adjustments there in their offensive line recruiting, and you know a lot of adjustments really everywhere. But so far, if you look at what Mickey's done, it's like a competent recruiting strategy. He's hitting all the commitments. They're getting out on the road. They're not going to be outworked. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They're not just going to give up. They're not going to let like Riley Van Poppel from Texas just get flipped. I mean, people are coming for him, and like Hayden
Oh
Moore,
yeah.
Barry Jackson. But I think Riley Van Poppel's the one that I have my eye on as like the next to go, because Michigan's hard after him, and he's in the state of Texas. Others are going to come for him too. So Brian Applewhite's got his work cut out for him. Him and Dawson are the kind of primary recruiters, but it's really about Brian Applewhite in that battle.
Right. Which is why, again, I don't think, to me, if we 6-6 in a bowl game is not my measuring stick. Do I want to get there? Yes, of course I do. But I think there's just so many other things that we can, you know, give Mickey a chance to, show what he can do. Like this program is such a mess. It's not just about winning and getting to a bowl game. It's about can he, get recruits while he's here. Like what is he doing on the recruiting trail? Is there at least a sign of progress there? Like what type of athletes can he bring in that could help Nebraska in the future? So I do think winning is important, but I think this program's such a mess. There's a bunch of other layers involved with it.
Oh yeah, I agree. And yeah, I don't think you have to put like a arbitrary, oh, we have to win 6 games. We have to get to 6 wins. If you get to 5-7 and you beat Iowa, I mean, it depends on what the situation is. But yeah, if things are trending in the right direction, I think where people are gonna like revolt in a sense, though, is if like Mickey gets them to 4 or 5 wins, and Trev's like, yeah,
Yeah.
we've made progress. And I think people are going to be like, yeah, this is the same thing we tried last year with Scott, and who's to say it's not going to fall apart? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think there's risk no matter what you do. There's risk at this position, so you just have to see how it's working out and get as much information as you can about Mickey, and Trev has to make the best decision that he can. But I think people who want this coach to be hired, it's not happening until after the season. So just you have to deal with that.
And that's a thing. And you said risk, and I just like to point this out as well. We've thrown coaching candidates names out over the past couple weeks, and I've heard different people throw out names, and everybody's like, "Oh, that guy's too much of a risk. This guy's too much of a risk." They're all risks. I mean, even Urban Meyer, like they're all risks. You don't know how they're gonna fit. You don't know what their recruiting strategy is gonna be. They're all some form of a risk. There may be some that are bigger risks than others, but there's an element of risk with every single coaching candidate.
Yep, yeah, there definitely is, and this Nebraska, job is different, and really, outside of Bo Pelini, no one's really had kind of success, here in this modern kind of era of college football, the post Osborne era. I mean, Solich did, but a lot of his success was kind of with the latter parts of that when the program was just a machine, and then it just kind of
Yeah.
fell off. So we'll see. Somebody's going to have to figure out how to win here. I think it can happen. I think you can recruit, but you need to get the right head coach, and we'll see. Maybe they've got that one in Mickey right now. I think we're going to find out a lot over the next 8 games, and we're going to find out a lot really over the next month, because it's Indiana, Illinois, Rutgers, and Purdue. Those are the 4 easiest games on the schedule right now. So if Nebraska doesn't win a game, doesn't win, 3, 4 of these games, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a long season.
It's going to be a long season, but if they win some of those games, it could be, a better season. So there's a lot at stake for these next couple of games. And I do not envy Mickey, like I said on Thursday, or Bill Bush, or even any of the players. This is a tough ask. And now it's about trying to make the most of it and then just letting the chips fall where they may. Nevertheless, I'm excited to see, where these chips fall, because I do think getting rid of, Frost and Shenander, the program can't really go lower at this point.
No, can't go lower. We've got some players, so yeah, hopefully we will see how things work out, and we'll be touching on the Indiana game and much more on Monday. So we'll kind of move into our final thoughts here on our bye-week edition here of the Husker Big Red YouTube channel, mostly talking about Mickey Joseph. But yeah, I guess with the bye week, how are you spending your Saturday? Just watching college football?
Watching college football, not stressing over Nebraska. I got to do another stream this afternoon, but I'm definitely going to watch some of the games, and definitely watching the game with Matt Campbell. And, it's going to be a fun Saturday for once, a fun, relaxing Saturday, not as stressful.
Yeah, not as stressful. Till next week. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, hey everybody, if you like this video, make sure that you subscribe, get into the comments, we'll make sure to have some discussion with you there. And as always, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our content. You can also find, our podcasts at Spotify, Apple, anywhere that you get your podcasts. So, make sure you follow along there so you don't miss anything. And we got the written content too at huskerbigred.com. You can find all my coverage of the Huskers. You can find all of Danny's, coverage of Nebraska athletics at thegreatcornholio.org. So don't miss that. Follow us on Twitter, and we will be back on Monday with another episode as we look forward to Indiana. So enjoy the week off and watching some football today. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.